I'm interviewing Mark Moss, Monday, December 6, 1999.
Hi, you've reached SingOut. If you have a touch-tone phone, you'll be switched directly. If you don't, stay on the line, and someone will be right with you. This message contains a list of all staff extensions, and you can make a selection at any time during this message. If you'd like to use a credit card to become a member of SingOut, or to place an order for books or back issues, press 1 now. To check on a previously placed order for billing or shipping information,
Please hold while I try that extension.
SingOut, Mark here.
Hi, Mark. My name is Mike Scully. I'm in Austin, Texas. I wrote you last week about some book research I was doing regarding the Folk Alliance. Do you recall that? Yeah, you said to call back. I don't know if this is a good time for you, but I just wanted to check in.
Yeah, sure, I guess.
Okay, well...
How much time do you need?
Oh, some go on and on. You can cut it short whenever you want, and we can either reschedule or drop it. I mean, I just want to do what people want to do. Do you recall the email? If not, I don't mean its specifics. I just mean my writing you.
I do.
Yeah. Okay. First of all, I should ask you. I'm doing a lot of interviews, so where people allow it, I record them so I can keep track of what was said. Is that okay with you? Okay. Let me. Well, I want to jump ahead of my usual format because I know, are very involved in all these issues and have been for a long time. Can I ask you kind of a preliminary question? I'm just curious about how many CDs or tapes would you say SingOut gets every month to review? Ballpark?
The last issue, which reflected the previous 3 months, we had over 700 releases.
Not in the issue, or just, what do you...
Not review. We have a column called Public...
Right, and you list the stuff that comes out.
Everything that comes in.
Okay.
Now that was, it's abnormally high, but it's been getting abnormally higher and higher and higher over the course of time.
Okay, and I guess the reason I asked that question, I had a feeling it would be something along those lines, although I had no information. That's higher than I thought. But against that backdrop, I guess I want to know, is the Folk Alliance as it has developed, is it doing any good? Is it getting over, is it encouraging too much stuff? Is it just sort of feeding into this belief on everybody's part that they can record too?
Well, I don't think the Folk Alliance has anything to do with that.
Okay. Okay.
I think that you're attaching much too much sort of power to an organization that really hasn't done a great deal of hasn't had a great number of successes looking outward as much as it has looking inward.
That types right into something I wanted to ask you. I've got it right on my screen here, because the Folk Alliance was founded with these, and you were on the steering committee, these 5 goals. You might remember them.
Chaired the steering committee and wrote
Okay.
the bylaws.
So you know the education, networking, advocacy, and I've been a member since '93, but I'm very much a casual participant. I go to the conferences.
Yeah, I mean, understand this. When we came up with these goals, there were a number of things that were going on here. One is that we needed to be able to, I think the underlying agenda where the Weissmans were concerned were to be inclusive. So if there were people who were bringing sort of certain kinds of agendas to the table, the edict was to draft something that would include them, not say, well, okay, but we're going to do this.
Right.
At the same time, we were realistic. I mean, the original steering committee was semi-realistic about the fact that we can't do everything.
Right.
So we're going to focus our efforts at some key activities, which we thought that over the course of time would either address all of the lofty goals, the expansive goals that we set out, more, would allow the organization sort of the internal right to add additional programs that might address those things.
Okay.
I think that we did all walk away from this first half dozen meetings with a feeling like that what we had drafted was, that we liked all the things that we were talking about.
Okay.
As much as we realized that it was, we were definitely biting off way more than we could chew at that point. I mean, we had no staff.
Right.
There were, I think, just a little over 100 people that got together at Malibu.
That's right.
The steering committee was I think 10 or something like that, maybe 8.
I think it was 12 votes, but a couple of them were couples, so maybe 14 individuals or something. And I don't know if all of them participated. I haven't reached everyone.
There's a great example of some of the idiosyncratic stuff that we had to deal with. And, both of the couples that were involved, it was
The Paytons were there, and Chankel and Cohen.
Actually, there were 3 couples: the Paytons, the Weissmans, and
Chankel and Cohen.
and Bob Cohen.
Right.
And not a single one of those couples voted together on more than 1 or 2 issues.
Mm-hmm.
So if we were saying, well, I think, all right, should it be this or should it be that? Sandy Payton would vote for this and Caroline Payton would vote for that.
Okay.
Thus nullifying,
Right.
effectively their vote. And yet, when I brought up a couple of times, that we should really have, one Fanny, one office,
Mm-hmm.
kind of a rule, there were hysterics over it.
Interesting. Why? Just as you were cutting out individuals, you were merging couples together?
No, I was saying, if Clark and Elaine both want to serve on the board, they should run individually.
I see.
Vote
Yeah.
on individually.
Right.
And I had nothing against both of them being on the board in particular. I just thought that it didn't make any sense for there to be 2 people sharing a seat.
Right.
For voting issues, for the idea that if we're trying to control the number of board members, I mean, this is all sort of inner machinations. But
Sure.
The point that I'm really trying to make here is that there were a couple things that we learned. One is that there are not a lot of differences between either any of our individual organizations and how we might need to go about organizationally figuring out how to accomplish our goals.
Right.
But we also learned that that's true outside of the folk music, quote unquote, genre. And it goes right across to all arts presenting, all nonprofit organizations, all volunteer organizations. We're dealing with the same kinds of issues that all of these other organizations deal with. But we also learned that folk music, because of its community's denial of a responsibility to either define itself, explain itself, create boundaries for itself, that it attracts, in some ways, the lunatic fringe of, and I don't mean that, or in some of the other comments I've made, as pejoratively as they sound, even as I'm uttering them.
Oh, I understand that.
But it's just, because I happen to like pixelated people.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have a problem with that. But I think it's important to recognize that, if when you're not, have a sense of humor.
I think the phrase denial of responsibility suggests that you would have liked to have seen some more definition or boundaries. Is that correct? I may be misreading you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a wonderful, lefty kind of axiom to say let's include everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that realistically, that you can't do the work that you need to do if you try to be everything to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So there were any number of issues surrounding watched there be, in a lot of cases, kind of a degeneration of some of the, of some of those boundary issues that I really strongly felt were important to put in place.
When you say
Not the
degenerate.
least of which, I mean, I feel like that the Folk Alliance should be a professional organization, an organization of organizations and professionals involved in the field.
Right, not anyone who sends in 40
I'm not
bucks.
using those definitions. That to mean that somebody who volunteers at a coffee house doesn't get to be counted. Shouldn't be included because they're a volunteer, because I'm using a sort of a different way of explaining what I mean by professional. I mean somebody who, in their participation in the field of folk music, performs a role that would be considered a professional role.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Whether they're a volunteer, whether it's a part-time thing, but I'm just the reason why they would want to be in the Folk Alliance.
Okay.
It was very important to me that we not reinvent the wheel, and I thought that trying to promote the organization to the general public, to people who attend folk clubs or attend festivals or play at group sings was would dilute whatever benefit that the organization could have.
Mm-hmm.
But by the time it came, we hit our third conference, the second conference after we approved the charter.
Right.
The organization was promoting itself as, the biggest folk party of the year.
Yeah.
Come one, come all. 24/7 of music.
Yeah.
Kind of, and the antithesis of what I felt the Folk Alliance should be doing, and I think that some of that has spilled over in continuing to kind of impede the most effective way of being able to do business in the conference.
Right.
This is not to say that I don't think the conference. I mean, I do think the conference is incredibly valued, and anybody who comes really ready, willing, and able to participate and work it, can usually in the first half hour they're there, make a couple of contacts and make the expense of coming to the thing all worthwhile.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that that the sort of anarchist, disorganized, proud of the fact, pride in our unwillingness to define the genre of music that we're supposedly promoting.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Supporting all work toward making the goals that we set up, those 5 goals, much more harder
Yeah.
accomplished, with the exception of like the networking thing.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I'll take that one back. It's harder to network when there's 2,000 people, of which 500 of them, as wonderful as they might be, really have no reason to be at the conference.
Sure.
Based on my other definitions.
Right.
I mean, there were all kinds of other issues that I think that the organization is continuing to have to battle with, such as, I believe that folk music in Canada is incredibly strong, incredibly vital, certainly a much higher percentage of sort of arts and music in general, as far as population-wise, than it is in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that there are some very, very different agendas and needs and issues where our Canadian constituency is concerned over our U.S. constituency. And I think that in some, when it works the best for the Folk Alliance has like a Canadian thing going on and a U.S. thing going on. And when it works the worst for the Folk Alliance is when there's sort of a guilty, windy-ass effort to make sure that there's an X percentage of Canadians and not allow there to be like a panel that doesn't have representation from both countries.
Okay, yeah.
Even if the issues being discussed are wholly separate between the two countries.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
there are tons of cases where there's a lot of overlap, but
Right.
there's just things like immigration.
Mm-hmm.
The issues about learning to deal with the INS
Mm-hmm.
and how to bring artists into the U.S. is entirely different than the issues about going into Canada. This is not to say that there are not also issues about bringing artists into Canada,
Right.
but that if you have an hour to discuss it and you have to divide it up so that it's 50-50, you end up doing neither job justice.
Sure.
I think that, you know, it reveals itself in certain people that have risen to leadership positions in the organization, and I'm not talking about our president, who I think is a brilliant guy
Mm-hmm.
and a good guy, but certain other people who have really had this sort of, second-class citizen vision of themselves that makes them always feel like that they're defending, you know, that they're on the defensive.
Right.
And I just thought, I think that it's been problematic, and I think that we have a number, you know, I mean a good number of you know, European participants in the conference every year, which I think is great, and there's no reason why I would ever deny anybody the right to be a member or participate or come to the conference or lead a workshop or any of those other issues.
Right.
But I do think that it's made it a lot harder for you know, for the organization to achieve some of its goals because when certain issues have to do with maybe promoting the organization to the U.S. government,
Mm-hmm.
to try to, you know, to try to get a little bit more equity in the way that the U.S. government interfaces with folk arts,
Right.
much in the way that the Canadian government interfaces with folk arts, that there's been like a battle cry. You know, there's out of like the last you know, dozen annual meetings that we've had, there's been, you know, 3 or 4 times that the Canadian caucus has had like these big like meetings decrying the fact that they aren't like treated well enough, or that there isn't enough of an emphasis in what they're doing.
Right.
And I just think that unless we have a unified agenda, that it makes it harder to, you know, to accomplish that agenda.
Yeah.
Because then we end up fighting with ourselves over, you know, over our internal quota system, and somebody on the outside just, you know, looks at us and goes, well, they can't figure it out for themselves.
Yeah.
I can go ignore them and go, you know, go deal with it someplace else. I mean, I think an organization that's really found a way to effectively deal with sort of a microcosm of these disparate issues is the IBMA.
Yeah.
There are certainly people within the IBMA who play, you know, very, very traditional bluegrass and believe that's the only way to go. And then there's people that play, you know, really experimental acoustic new country stuff.
Right.
But they've all been able to be embraced.
Yeah.
But they've also been able to have like one statement that goes out there to promote the music that they're promoting.
Mm-hmm.
They don't allow sort of the internal argument to hit the public.
Right. Right.
And, you know, I think that, you know, the Folk Alliance has had tremendous successes. The growth of the conferences themselves, and I think that, you know, just the fact that there's this huge gathering of people that get together and, you know, just to talk about folk music every year,
Mm-hmm.
is really a good thing. The idea that it hasn't been able to be capitalized into, well, I mean, for instance, when the IBMA started, within like the first 5 years of its existence, there were multiple categories that they had added to the Grammys with definitions attached to them.
Okay. Yeah.
So that when an award was given by the Grammys, you know, like a nationally, if not internationally recognized sort of benchmark for like what's good in music,
Right.
who might not agree with what goes on. You know, the IBMA was able to have an impact with that group.
Yeah.
Okay, the Folk Alliance, the last year in the Grammys, Greg Brown had a nomination in the traditional folk category.
Yeah, I heard that. In fact, Sandy Payton thought he had won. Was that correct? Or okay.
That was not good.
Okay.
But the fact that we've been unable to either effectively make the case with our own membership, like that we should come up with some kind of definition for what's contemporary folk, what's traditional folk,
Right.
and or to lobby within the Grammys to bring out additional categories. I mean, I've worked with ASA, the Indies, for the past 4 or 5 years, and they've allowed us to like sit down and come up with definitions for contemporary folk, traditional folk, old time, bluegrass, blues, acoustic,
Right.
all these different categories. And I'm not saying that the Grammys are going to come up with like 40 folk categories
Sure.
to accommodate it, but they ought to be able to at least prevent rock stars from
Right.
from just putting their record in the folk category because it's easier to win there,
Yeah.
and pushing out the people that are really contemporary folk artists, and that the traditional folk category should really reflect traditional rooted
Sure.
artists, artists recording, and I think I see that as being a tremendous failing of the folk lines. I see
Yeah.
I see a tremendous failing of the folk lines in that that we haven't been able to nail down umbrella agreements with ASCAP and BMI to offer some alternative relief protection to constituent members in the presenting realm, and to lobby to see about making the disbursements arm of ASCAP and BMI a little fairer to our membership.
Okay.
And that was an issue. That was one of like the defining issues that brought us together in Malibu. What was it, 12 years ago now? Was people were talking about ASCAP and BMI.
Spell out the issue for me if you could. I mean, I know it has to do with payment in clubs.
Right. The clubs feel that they're being unfairly assessed.
Okay.
Some people don't believe they need to pay at all, but that's a wholly separate issue.
Yeah.
I mean, effectively, ASCAP and BMI has each of them have different schedules of assessment that they charge venues or presenters, but none of them take into consideration the kind of small, homegrown church coffee house, house
Okay.
concert series kind of situation that is often, if not usually, the place that folk music is presented.
Okay, I
So,
understand.
in other words, where folk music is presented at Carnegie Hall, they have a scale, and if you sell out Carnegie Hall, it theoretically should make sense. And,
Right.
that's I would argue that we shouldn't really be arguing with that one.
Right.
But if you're doing a concert series in a church coffee house that holds 100 people,
Right.
and the entry-level concert schedule is from 50 to 250 or 50 to 500 people, and sort of is treating the venue as if it's like a legitimate, like a big concert hall that the tickets are $20 a piece.
Right.
There's something wrong there. There should be a coffee house, house concert schedule.
Right.
And I know from my own talking with the ASCAP and BMI people that if we would get our own shit together, they would be willing to talk about that.
Gotcha.
And setting up new schedules, negotiating a blanket discount where people can buy into the Folk Alliance's ASCAP and BMI blanket licensing.
Okay.
And at a discount over what they would have to if they got a direct assessment.
Right.
Also allow the Folk Alliance to deal with the national headquarters that's a little savvier about all this stuff than the regional reps that tend to not really know and be a little bit more bulldoggy about the whole thing.
Sure.
So I mean, there's tons of there's that issue. I don't think that the Folk Alliance has been able to be last 10 years, for instance, although things have finally been resolved in a positive way, the Archive of Folk Culture at the Library of Congress has been under fire a number of times and threatened with defunding.
Right.
And the Folk Alliance really hadn't been able to be there.
Yeah.
There was a network of people that in many cases overlapped or segued with the network of people in the Folk Alliance, but the Folk Alliance should have been able to take a real leadership position in squaring that up.
Right.
It doesn't have the mechanism there to do it.
Why is that so? I'm wondering, I mean, after 12 years or so, approximately, why is that so, 11 or 12 years?
Well, we have a great executive director of the organization right now who is partially hogtied by some members of the board that don't get it, that don't understand like the role of a board in a nonprofit organization and the responsibilities of a board in a nonprofit situation. And then on the other hand, she's hogtied by membership stuff. I mean, I know that she spent a good portion of her time, at least an equal portion of her time, just sort of quelling complaints from people with their own personal agenda, like "What have you done for me lately?" kind of stuff. As she does out there, stomping, the path and
right.
Trying to get things accomplished. And then you have this huge conference that we put on, which is, I mean, it's really quite large, and most of the organization, I mean, overwhelmingly most of the organization, the actual work involved in executing that is done by a relatively small staff, so that, a staff that's much smaller than those of many folk festivals who are members of the Folk Alliance, used to put on their events, which in some cases are smaller than the annual Folk Alliance conference.
Right.
So the staff gets
diffused. Yeah.
Yeah. We're rather overwhelmed by
right.
By keeping up with certain kinds of those issues.
Sure.
Part of there were two phrases that were repeated over and over and over again during the formation part of the Folk Alliance. One was "Don't reinvent the wheel," and the other was I'm sorry, this was
okay.
The other was that we wanted to sort of raise the public awareness or acceptance or respect for folk music in art. The focal point of all of our individual works.
Right.
We wanted to see that, do better.
Yeah.
So, there should be a way of combining those two efforts. There's a whole bunch of other, we haven't been able to effectively educate our the performing community, members of our community, that they need to, take care of insurance needs for themselves, health insurance, homeowners insurance, life insurance.
Right.
So that over the course of, the Folk Alliance publishes a newsletter which runs obituaries just like Dirty Lynn does, Sing Out does, Folk Roots does, and half a dozen other magazines that are out there who are doing it.
Yeah.
But over the course of this period of time, we still have, time again, announcements that we need to do something because this performer was killed in a plane accident, this performer's house burned down, this performer, and none of them have even like basic level insurance. Well, the Folk Alliance should be out there, either, and And I don't even think it's so much that we should be out there organizing a group plan, because there are tons of group plans out there.
Yeah.
We should be assembling a master list of here's how you can insure yourself reasonably.
Right.
Join this organization, get the insurance through them.
Right.
These are, we should be publishing. We shouldn't be publishing a quarterly newsletter. We should be publishing a series of booklets that deal with some of the core issues and the core needs of our field.
Right.
And those, there are tons of newsletters, stuff that's already out there. We're doing what somebody else is already doing. It's not saying that they're not, that it's not well read or well written or interesting or whatever else. It's just that, those resources are already out there. We should be promoting those resources. Help people to join their local folk song society and get their newsletter. Subscribe to Dirty Linen, Sing Out.
Yeah.
Bluegrass Unlimited, Living Blues, Folk Roots, Dulcimer Players News, Auto Harp Quarterly, acoustic guitar, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because all this information is readily available in the other publications.
Sure.
So what's the point?
Right. Right.
Those are kind of, these are the frustrations that I have as I look at the organization.
Sure.
I just served on a committee to examine the showcasing.
Right. Mm-hmm.
At the national conference.
Yeah, I was curious about it.
We had I think that, despite the fact that we had a lot of disparate opinions going into it, I think that we really were able to come up with, with a really interesting, innovative proposal to look at some of what either is or should be a universally accepted recognition that there are certain aspects of the official Folk Alliance sponsored showcasing that are just plain not working and haven't been for the last couple of years.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You walk into a room that seats 700 or 800 people and there's under 100 sitting there.
Yeah.
You got a problem.
Sure.
But it gets, but there were mechanics within the committee that before the committee finished its report, one particular member of the committee, a board member that should damn well know better, sort of held his own secret little conference with the people in Vancouver who are beginning work to organize the 2001 conference,
Mm-hmm.
and freak them out, thinking that they were going to have the power of organizing their conference taken away from them, and essentially torpedoed the process. Well, even though we were able to make a proposal taking concerns from them into consideration, taking issues from our executive director into consideration that she could buy into to her, and where it should have been that she could have taken it and then worked it, found a political way of being able to sell those proposals
Okay.
in a way to that committee before she even saw the proposals. The committee was threatening to cancel the conference. I mean, it was really screwed up.
What was the nature of the proposal, broadly? I mean,
we're looking at doing, breaking the showcasing down into smaller theme-oriented
Okay.
showcases
Right.
in the rooms that are you've been at the conference.
yeah. Uh-huh.
So
Number of times.
like the large meeting rooms that
Yeah.
the showcasing now starts at 11:30 or midnight, that we would use those rooms and you would see a breaking down of themes, either or and both genre, like there might be a blues room or a singer-songwriter room or a
Mhm.
Celtic room, and there might be a church coffee house room, festival stage room, art center room,
Okay.
a blues bar room,
Okay.
kind of a thing where the sets would be able to be longer, more people would be able to showcase.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be set up like you coffee house, a performer that might be great at a church coffee house is set on a huge stage performing to 99% empty seats.
Right.
That
Sure.
person would have the ability to be in a venue that would allow them to interface with the people that are there much in the way that they would in their prospective employer's venue.
Right.
No more of this 10 to 15-minute showcasing thing where you give the people enough time, like at least 25 to 30 minutes, so that they can, go out there and show a little bit of what they do.
Yeah.
All of those things I think would have, and I hope that they still find a way to sort of introduce those in Vancouver, but Phyllis has her hands full now.
Right.
Where had she been able to propose it in her own way,
Sure.
People would have been a lot less defensive and it would have been a lot less problematic.
What's the nature of the opposition to that? If you're able to talk about it.
Well, the nature of the opposition is it's just irrational. The proposal that the Vancouver people were working on with that, sort of outside of any of the committee's process was they wanted to rent a 900-seat venue a couple of blocks from where the convention was going to take place, and they were going to do 3 nights of programming in that venue, 2 showcase nights and the gala concert. And on the 4th night of the Folk Alliance, they were going to have a pub crawl. And what we proposed back to them was to take the gala concert, change some of the conceptual stuff surrounding it, where it would combine a gala and a preview of some of the showcasing in the femur rooms that would be taking place on Friday and Saturday night.
Sure.
The gala would be on Thursday night, and let them do the pub crawl on Wednesday night. And unfortunately, the committee member / board member who went back and sounded the alarm didn't read any of the discussion that was taking place. I called him soliciting his opinion so that we could finish doing our work in time to get the proposal to Phyllis. Had about an hour-long conversation with him describing what we had been talking about, what we were talking about proposing, stuff like that, and he just completely screwed up what we were talking about and went back and told these people that the national office is going to take control and they're not going to let you do anything, which had nothing to do with what he and I discussed. Yeah. And then the next morning I got a call from Phyllis saying, "Can you send me some kind of a report because these people are freaking out?" And I went back to this committee member and said, that was pretty much of an asshole thing to do. The committee wasn't done with its work. You had no right to do that. And even if you didn't decide that you had a right to do it, why didn't you at least get the proposal right?
Yeah.
Where it would have been less threatening to these people. And he said, "Yeah, I guess I did kind of screw it up."
Right.
Like admits it, but takes no responsibility for it and has no issue with ever doing it again.
Sure.
Some, because you haven't figured out what kind of pit.
Yeah.
Because we spent several months sort of debating lots of these different issues, and when you have 5 or 6 people who are all busy experts in their own, in their own little worlds, to come together and kind of put ideas out there and let other people tailor them in a way, it's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
Because everybody, says, well, no, I know what I need, and this is what I, So it's a matter of negotiating and compromise. And you come up with like a negotiation and compromise, which in fact very specifically tried to accommodate the plans that were already underway in Vancouver. I mean, there were some members of the committee who said the folk line should not be showcasing at all.
Yeah.
Get out of it. The showcasing is done brilliantly by all the other people who are doing the non-sponsored showcase.
Right.
So let's just open up the time, let them do more of it.
Right.
There was that all the way to other proposals for doing. I mean, these are just examples examples of I think where we get caught up in the process. In some ways, I believe in a benevolent dictatorship.
Yeah.
We put Phyllis in that position. She's the executive director. Will I agree with everything she does? No.
Mm-hmm.
Am I totally 100% comfortable with living with I have enough respect with her that if she makes a decision, even though it's different than mine, I go, hey, she's the one that's leading that. If the focal line isn't accomplishing its goals, then
Yeah.
replace your executive director.
No, that's the role of the board, isn't it? To set
Right.
broad policy and hire people.
And then so Phyllis should be running. What it should be is if Phyllis wants some input for ways of fixing the showcase, she should put together a group of people to make a proposal to her, and she should make an authoritative,
Right.
Dictatorial decision about what the changes are going to be made, and that's it.
Right.
The board has no business discussing how showcases are going to be taken place.
Sure.
That's the executive director's role and the conference manager's role.
Yeah.
The board should be saying, hey, are we fulfilling these 5 goals
Right.
that we set up in the bylaws of the organization?
Right.
And I would submit to you that most of the board members probably don't know what the 5 goals are,
Yeah.
or sees them as being sort of ancillary because, I think I did see those, but let's talk about, what we're going to, what kind of hotel we're going to
Right. Right. Right.
which I just, I think it's, that the board is involved in certain things and just have no business being involved in.
Sure. What type of definitions would you employ in setting the boundaries of what the focal alliance contains? And I'm assuming from what you've said that you were in favor of some sort of definition early on.
Yeah, no, and I think that if seeing as the focal alliance has accepted it's one of its responsibilities to, promote folk music to the great unwashed out there.
Right.
It's one of those 5 goals. We have a responsibility to be able to explain what it is that we're promoting.
Right.
We have to define it, however ugly and uncomfortable that may be. Do I have a personal way of defining it? Yeah, anybody who reads Sing Out
Yeah.
can probably figure it out to a certain extent.
Sure.
Do I say that, if I was the executive director of the Folk Alliance, I would be arguing for that definition. And from where I sit, I want to argue for a definition.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, this is one of the things that the IBMA has successfully proven and figured out, that if it makes, by taking a stand, it's going to antagonize and alienate a certain constituency of their membership. But a year later, those people are back.
Okay.
They get over it.
Yeah. I don't think it's nearly as important to what the definition is, because most of the people who I talk to about it, and most of the people who are in leadership positions with the focal line, I don't have a problem with their definition of what folk music is, Right.
but I think we need to come up with one.
Sure.
I think that we do have a disparate membership base right now. There's a number of, there's a ton of singer-songwriters that are in the organization based on the definition of folk by a whole other section of our constituency would not be able to be included in the group.
Right.
And I think that similarly that there's a whole bunch of singer-songwriters out there who consider traditional folk music to be kind of irrelevant. I've actually seen discussion and debate on the internet from one particular relatively vocal individual who said that he doesn't believe that there is anything as traditional music. That all music was composed by somebody.
Yeah. I've also heard that traditional music is old music. Anything.
Yeah, I think that there is a popularly held amongst the broader community, and folk music is what I like.
Yeah.
And I think that that's been a big part of the problem. trying to, to educate and promote and support this music out there, because that's not good enough.
Right.
It's also not good enough to say it's anything horses don't sing.
Yeah.
Because then, Bach chorales are folk music.
Sure.
But I do think that there is a way of creating an umbrella definition for folk music that is inclusive of all the genres of music that that are currently being dealt with by the folk alliance, but specific enough so that people can come to recognize the phrase folk music in much the same way as they recognize the phrase jazz.
Well, I was wondering about that. I mean, I do you think anybody would have to leave if you came up with a definition, or could you really get everybody in? Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about, and bear in mind that this example is based upon the fact that the only thing I know of this performer is what I saw at, I think it was an Albuquerque showcase. I've never heard a CD, don't know anything about her, but Susan Werner gave a great 10-minute show of what I thought was cabaret material. I don't know what else she does. She was a wonderful singer, but I'm not sure she belonged in the umbrella based on the 10 minutes of piano and performance that I saw.
Right.
Where do you take? She put her in a nightclub in Manhattan. She's a wonderful entertainer with a great voice, and I can listen to that stuff too and like it. But I don't know that she was a folk performer.
Well, sure, and I have like a whole, along with Wade Maynard and Roscoe Hall.